Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our reaction to the Brazilian Grand Prix qualifying, and what might just be the longest qualifying reaction video we're ever going to do ever. Because my god, a lot started here, starting from yesterday. Before we get into all of that, remember to like and subscribe. Of course, a massive shout out to our members as well. Dakota, The Joyous James, Robin Myers, and Cinnamon Strudel. Let's start talking about this then, because firstly, we've got to briefly mention the sprint race of yesterday. Max Verstappen was given a 5-second penalty for a virtual safety car infringement, and that dropped him down to 4th place. To me, that's pretty... There's nothing you can really say about that. They've got the data there. He was up. If he's up, that's a penalty. Straight away there. I still feel slightly dubious about the virtual safety car and what happened there. Go watch the video yesterday for all of that. Anyway, let's start talking about qualifying yesterday, where there was incredibly heavy rain throughout yesterday, really, basically since the sprint finished up until the end of the day. Now, I tuned in to qualifying about an hour before the session was supposed to start, and they showed images of the track and the paddock and everything, and it was incredibly clear to me that this was not going to take place. And if you go online, you saw a lot of people being like, yeah, this is not going to take place. There was even an interview with Frederick Vasseur who went, this is not going to take place. But instead, F1 do this thing which they always do in this kind of situation, where they just wait and wait and wait. And they go, right, in 15 minutes, we'll tell you something. Then 50 minutes comes around, they go, okay, another 15 minutes, we'll tell you something. And another 50 minutes come around, and go, okay, in 30 minutes, we'll tell you something. And they just push and push and push, and it was clear it was going to be delayed. And eventually it was delayed. Now, for us watching at home, obviously that's a bit annoying, because we just sat there, just waiting for something to happen. But for those people in the stands, this must be dreadful, because, not every stand has cover, and even the ones that have cover might not even be very good, and you still might be getting soaking wet. I saw a video last night of someone in one of the stands without a cover, and basically where you put your feet below your seat was basically just rivers of water, and then a river coming down the stairs. So people just sat there waiting and waiting and waiting for hours in the rain, when realistically, hours before, they could have said, we're cancelling it, you go home, stay dry. So I hate when F1 does this, but, obviously it was the right call to make. Just make it better, because everyone knew an hour before qualifying was supposed to happen that it wasn't going to happen. Anyway, there is my rant over about that. Let's move to what's happened this morning, because we have a record, everybody. The earliest time a qualifying session has ever happened in F1 history. My goodness, that's one to tell the grandkids. Even more interesting, though, it's still wet. Nowhere near as bad as it was yesterday, but it is still wet. And what they've actually done quite well here, and what they've learned from the Belgian Grand Prix of 2021, is instead of just going, well, we announced these times like a year ago, so it's going to be these times, they've gone, right, okay, let's look at the radar, let's look at the forecast. When in this day is the best time to run these sessions? And they've moved the race earlier. Of course, they put the qualifying session in there as well. So they've positioned the sessions around the weather to give us the best chance to have these sessions go forward. Despite that, it still is wet, because it's basically raining on and off all day in Sao Paulo today. So it's going to be wet for the race as well. But we have this wet qualifying session. Let's start talking about Q1 after 4 minutes of rambling there, because there's a huge queue to start. The rain is expected to increase throughout the session, so everyone wants to get out there just as soon as they can. Of course, you want to get those bank laps in as well on an unpredictable session like it is. Everyone on full wets to begin the session, and just very cautious at the start. As the cars go around, that dry line will start to appear. You'll get to know the track a little bit better in terms of where certain puddles are. Very cautious at the start, so no real times being set. Just people getting that confidence up and up and up. A couple of people going off, yellow flags here and there for the likes of Lawson, Joe and Stroll, all going off at the penultimate corner there. Valtteri Bottas is the first to make the jump over to Inters, but at this point it was far too early. He was not getting an advantage from there. The one person, though, who from the moment they hit the track to the end of qualifying was consistently impressive was Esteban Ocon. for quite a bit of Q1, he was top, and he just continued to be really fast all the way through. And he's not one of those guys that I would ever put in the category of wet weather driver. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't ever remember like a stellar wet performance for Esteban Ocon. But this qualifying session was incredible for him, especially considering, in the sprint and in sprint qualifying, I think for sprint qualifying he was 19th. So he showed no pace all weekend. But this rain has come round, and Esteban Ocon is on it. Really good session for him so far today. Then we get the first red flag of the day for Franco Colapinto in the wall. Spun out on the straight down to turn 3 and was into the wall. Thankfully, looks okay. The issue comes with, and this will affect quite a few people as we go through the session, is because we have the qualifying and the race on the same day, and there's just 3 hours, maybe a little bit more, between now and the race. Those cars have to get back to the garage and fixed in time. And some people have had incredibly big shunts today. And there's 2 teams who have 2 cars who've had big shunts today. So trying to get those cars fixed in time to start the race, I would put money on right now we are not having 20 cars start this race today. But the question is who? Because it could be Colapinto not starting later on. With 8 minutes and 50 seconds to go in the rain, 8 minutes 50 seconds to go in Q1, more rain is predicted, and the bottom 5 at this point was 20th place Lewis Hamilton, who has shown no pace all weekend, but is one of the greatest wet weather drivers of all time, but still was not able to extract anything from that Mercedes car. Valtteri Bottas was on the intermediates, he was in 19th. George Russell at this point also struggling down in 18th. Zhou Guanyu in 17th, and Alexander Albon in 16th place as the session restarts. They were the ones at risk. And as the session does get restarted, Valtteri Bottas goes back over to the full wet. The intermediate dry is really not working at this point. And with this pause in the action as well, that dry line that was forming would have been filled again with the rain. So back to full wets for Valtteri Bottas. Ollie Behrman decided to chance it on the inters, but before the actual session gets going, Haas changed their mind. He pulls over in the pit lane. They wheel him back in and put him on full wet tyres. George Russell was overtaking just out of the pit lane, which of course you're allowed to do. I don't know which of the RBs it was, but one of them was not happy at his attempt to try and overtake and nearly squeezed him into the wall. So Russell not having a great time, followed by when he got onto the track itself, he went off on turn 1, and as he rejoined right in front of Alexander Albon. Now I haven't seen this being investigated as of yet, but for me, that was a very unsafe rejoin, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was, but nothing has popped up as of yet, so we might just get away with that. With about a minute to go, Lando Norris finds himself in the drop zone. He does eventually set a lap time, which is only good enough for 15th place. So Lando Norris, despite going on to set pole position, spoiler alert, was very close to leaving in Q1. But he does make it through. Those out in Q1, though. Zhou Guanyu is in his traditional place of 20th. I need to have a cough. 1 second, everyone. Here it comes. There we go. Zhou Guanyu is 20th. Nico Hülkenberg in 19th. Franco Colapinto was in the wall, but will start 18th, if he starts at all, that is. Ollie Behrman in 17th. The big shock, though, Lewis Hamilton out in 16th place. So both Behrman and Hülkenberg, who showed fantastic pace in the dry, now the complete opposite, both out in Q1. And Lewis Hamilton just hasn't shown pace at all this weekend. We'll be looking to try and rectify that in the race. Going into Q2, though, and everyone's on the wets again, apart from Oscar Piastri, who goes out on the intermediate tyres. On his first lap time, he goes third, whilst Max Verstappen is top on the full wets. But as that happens again, Oscar Piastri goes purple in Sector 1 and then goes on to set the fastest lap of all, and all the other drivers follow through with him and swap over to the intermediate. George Russell still struggling at this point. The Mercedes looking quite the handful. George Russell does have a bit of a spin here but manages to keep it going. This is when we get another red flag. This time Carlos Sainz in the wall. And this is how it looks now with this red flag. 5 minutes 51 to go. Drop zone again is Ocon 15th, Yuki Tsunoda 14th, Albon 13th, Gasly 12th, and Norris 11th. So Norris again struggling. Norris really didn't show much pace at all until Q3. Don't know if he was maybe holding it in reserve or just kind of easing himself in. You know, when he knows he has a fast car below him, he knows he doesn't have to really push as hard as everyone else maybe, and maybe just trying to get that confidence throughout the sessions to fully send it in Q3. But as the red flag comes to an end, we have seen a bit of a track evolution here because both Norris and Albon jump massively up the times. This is when we get another red flag. This time Lance Stroll in the wall. This brings out the red flag, which ultimately ends the session. Now there is quite a bit of controversy around here. The incident itself was pretty identical to what happened to Franco Colapinto earlier in the session. But the main difference is the amount of time it took for that red flag to come out. Because for Colapinto's crash, for Sainz's crash, it seemed pretty immediate red flags. And Stroll's accident, like I said, pretty identical. The rear wing was broken on one half, so it was very obvious that Stroll was not continuing at this point. But the red flag took an awfully long time to come out, and it meant the session was over, meaning those knocked out were Gasly in 15th, Sainz in 14th, of course he was already in the wall, Perez in 13th, Max Verstappen in 12th, and Valtteri Bottas, a very impressive 11th for him. But controversy comes now with this red flag, because as I went back and checked it again. Now, as I saw it as a viewer, the second that we have the first yellow flag for Stroll in the wall is also the second that Verstappen goes from 10th to 11th. So if they threw a red flag at that point, Verstappen is still in the drop zone. But from hearing Christian Horner's interview just then, if they had thrown that red flag at that point, there would have been enough time, just enough time, to set off again after the restart. How Crofty was defending it was saying the reason they didn't instantly throw the red flag is because they wanted to make sure everyone got their lap times in, which to me is one of the strangest defences I ever heard, because the red flag is about safety, and if there's a car crashed into a wall on a dangerous wet track, you don't go, oh, we need these guys to finish their lap times. You go, we need to make sure the track is stopped and no one's going fast, because we need to make sure that, if the medical car needs to get to Lance, we can get that. We need to make sure that no one's going to have another accident there. So for me, I don't think this is a controversy here. It's not a controversy in terms of the FIA or whoever trying to screw over Max Verstappen and Red Bull. The tinfoil hat is staying off for this one. But I do think it's a very odd decision to wait that long to have a red flag, because it just makes no sense, especially when you see the 4 other red flags we have in this session, where they were all called pretty instantaneously. Why are we waiting for people to finish their lap times in order to throw a red flag for this one? It makes very little sense to me from there. But yeah, I think even if they'd thrown it immediately and they could have restarted the session, there's no saying for sure that Verstappen would have been able to get to the front of the queue in the pit lane and go out and set a faster lap time from there. We don't know what would have happened. So, who knows? What we do know for sure, though, is Max Verstappen will start the race from 17th place, whilst his championship rival, Lando Norris, is on pole. So, a huge gain here for Lando Norris in the title picture. Unfortunately, Max Verstappen is Max Verstappen, and one of his greatest races ever was a wet Brazil. So here we have Max Verstappen in Brazil, in the wet, starting quite low down, has shown tremendous pace throughout the weekend. I see no reason as to why Max Verstappen cannot make it through up into some good points positions, and if the race is anything like this qualifying session was, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a few safety cars, if not a few red flags in the race itself, and that benefits anyone who's trying to make their way up through the grid. So despite this bad result here for Verstappen, certainly not over in terms of him gaining some points, and sets us up for quite an exciting race later on today. So we'll definitely one to look out for. We haven't even got to Q3 yet, so let's move on to that now. And this is a very interesting one here, because for the first time since Max Verstappen's debut, we have a Q3 session that does not include Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen, which is a mad statistic to think about there. For the first time since 2015, a Q3 session without either one of them, which is just madness. Now, Q3 here is a bit different to normal, just because it is wet. So apart from Russell and the two Racing Bull cars, everyone just seems to be setting continuous lap times. They've just gone out there and just going and trying to find as much lap times as they can. Ocon at this point still has that great speed I spoke about before, briefly tops the session for a while, was replaced by Piastri, who was replaced by Albon, who was then replaced by Norris, all within a small space of time between each other there as they all try and find the confidence, try and find the speed on the track. Then we get, guess what? A red flag. Fernando Alonso in the wall. A very quick red flag here, as different to the Stroll one. But 6 minutes to go here. This was our top 10. So Stroll got through to Q3 despite crashing in Q2, so he was 10th with no time. Alonso was 9th, Lawson 8th, Yuki 7th, Leclerc in 6th, Russell 5th, Ocon 4th, Piastri 3rd, Albon 2nd, Lando Norris in P1. So the real shining people at this point were Albon and Ocon, really getting the most out of this wet weather to get some good results in at this point. As we restart the session, Russell again really struggling with the car, sliding all over the place. You can see how difficult it is to drive that Mercedes. Not as difficult as the Williams of Alexander Albon, who crashed and gave us our 5th red flag to equal the record for most amount of red flags in a single qualifying session. Huge crash for Albon here, very similar to how his race ended last year. I mean, that was a contact with Kevin Magnussen, but he went into that wall into turn 1. He said on the radio it might be a brakes failure. Either way, he definitely got on that white line, and we know in the wet that's incredibly slippy. So he hit that and then went right into the wall. Huge damage on that car there. Now, he said he was okay on the radio, but as he was coming out of the car, you could see him grabbing his wrists, very reminiscent of what happened to Ricciardo at the Dutch Grand Prix last year. So, hopefully he is okay from there, but that car is in a very bad way and could take a long time to repair. So again, question marks as to if he will make the race. The thing with this is, though, as well, Williams, like Aston, have two cars who have now crashed in this qualifying session, and we have seen Williams already once this year sacrifice one driver's car for another. If we go back to Australia, where Albon crashed there, they gave Logan Sargent's chassis over to Albon so he could compete in the race. Now, the dynamic of Albon and Colapinto is very different to the dynamic of Albon and Sargent, because Albon was clearly superior to Sargent at that time, whereas Colapinto has shown that he is very decent so far in the races that he has done. I don't think it's going to be a question of talent this time, even though, Albon has qualified well and Colapinto hasn't. It might be a question of time and parts. We don't know if they have the time needed and the parts needed to fix both cars and get them both in this race. So this adds to my feeling. I don't think we might see Colapinto in this race. I think they might go, look, Albon's got a good position here. Let's try and capitalise on this. Everyone focus on Albon's car from here. But that is definitely one to look into in this race, because realistically, we could get to the race and have 5 cars not starting in terms of Albon, Colapinto, Sainz, Alonso and Stroll, because realistically there's just not that much time. They've got to get the cars back firstly. That takes time. Then analyse what's happened. Then try and fix it. So it's a big job for all of these teams here, especially the likes of Aston and Williams, who have 2 cars they need to fix. So that's definitely a story to keep an eye on throughout the day. 3 minutes 31 to go after the red flag. Now we restart here, and this is when we see Russell and the two Racing Bulls guys just kind of wait in their car, get the heat in the tyres through those blankets to go for that one lap, whereas the others are just gaining the confidence on the track, setting those continuous lap times. The confidence does not come to Piastri, though, who on his final lap locks up into turn 1, so just no real fast time from Piastri in this session. But as we cross the line, in 10th is Stroll, of course, he didn't set a time. 9th is Alonso, who crashed at the start of Q3. Oscar Piastri is 8th, starting behind Alexander Albon, who also had that crash. Charles Leclerc, a disappointing 6th place. No real pace for him at all in Q3 at this point. But then it makes for a very exciting top five because fifth is Liam Lawson, fourth Esteban Ocon, in third is Yuki Tsunoda, second George Russell, and then Lando Norris claims pole position. Lando at the end of this session really has set the boards alight. He really has had the confidence in the car, in the conditions to set that lap time, really saving all that time for the end. But I think that from second to fifth there is incredible because George Russell has struggled all session. We saw how much Hamilton struggled. Russell's been fighting the car all day, so to put that on the front row I think was incredible from Russell there. Yuki Tsunoda in the Racing Bull is third. Esteban Ocon in an Alpine in 2024 has put it fourth. That's a madness. Then Liam Lawson as well, what's this now? Is this his third race of the year? And he's fifth. So yeah, some fantastic results here in this qualifying session, which should make for a very exciting race. Lots of people out of position from here. Mix that in with, we're going to have basically the same conditions for the race. We are setting up to what could very easily be a race of the year candidate. So I'll be here immediately after the race to talk about all of it. Hopefully I'll see you there as well. Like and subscribe for that. Let me know what you thought of all of the going-ons here, because it was pure madness. Until next time, until later today, of course, have a good one. I'll see you then. Goodbye.